start like clapping my hands and getting going with it. Good morning. Welcome to Spirituality Gone Wild. I am Debbie G, and it is time for Cuppa Grata. That's a shot of expression and 2 squirts of reality. All right, gal. This is really going to get deep today. I promise you. If you're loading up right now, get ready with a pen and a piece of paper, and also get ready to meet the author of this incredible book, who I'm getting ready to bring on. Have you, male or female, but particularly women, have you ever felt the grip of somebody that you've been with? If your past lover could be a husband, boyfriend, whatever it is, it could be somebody in your life. I've had one that maybe was there for just like a minute, what seemed like a minute anyway. And you feel like I understand this because, like, I'll think about that person sometimes, and I'll still feel that gripping feeling, and that usually for me is like to come up so that I can review if I'm feeling worthy or deserving, and why am I not actually, and why are these things coming up? But we have an expert in the house that's really going to dive deep. This book is called "Break the Grip of Past Lovers." It is by Jumana Sophia, and I'm just gonna open it to a chapter. This one happens to be healing from betrayal and manipulation. Okay, this is a good one. Imagine yourself, imagine driving by yourself on a long road trip through the countryside, over gentle rolling hills and with clear blue skies overhead, when out of nowhere a dense silvery fog descends. Suddenly, you cannot see even a foot in front of your car. The meteorological term for this phenomenon is whiteout, and it can be terrifying. In extreme cases, not only is your vision completely obscured, but you can lose your sense of what is up and what is down. This horizon disappears. The horizon, excuse me. There are no shadows, no landmarks, no points of reference. For those who have experienced the shock of betrayal, it can seem as if your whole life has suddenly enveloped in a white coat. Nothing is familiar, and you've completely lost your bearings. The trust you had in someone has been turned upside down, and while the world still exists, you can no longer see the way ahead. And without further ado, the author of Break the Grip of Past Lovers is Jumana Sophia. Jumana, welcome back to Cuppa Grata and Spirituality Gone Wild.
Hi, Debbie. Good morning. It's
Hi,
really sweet to
sweetie.
be here with you. Hi.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I first want to thank you for writing this book because as a woman, I know that this is a really important thing to look at.
Yeah.
In my life, I've had the shortest relationship I had was actually to the father of my kids. The shortest marriage, that was 5 years. Then I had a 9-year relationship, and that was interesting. And then I had a 13-year. Then I decided to stay single. Had a couple little, hey, what's up in the middle of that. But that's about it. But I do
Mhm.
notice that especially with 13-year relationship, that there's these lingering parts that I see even now, 5 years later, that still come up. And so I can't wait to explore these things with you. But I'm first going to dive into why would you write a book about this? I mean, I'm not even why, because you love us so much. That's why. But
Yes.
what happened to push? Because something had to have happened to push you to the point of like, okay, wait a minute, ladies, look at what I just went through, and guess what?
Yeah. Okay. Great question, Debbie. Yeah. So I think, like most people I know, most women, certainly, there was. I went through many cycles of relationships, intimate relationships, and I would end up in agony afterward, right, or during. And the book itself came after the course that I wrote of the same name, and that came after losing a 7-year marriage, during which time, our marriage, we loved each other. It was, he's a dear friend, he's a beautiful man, and there was a lot of addiction, um,
Mm,
in
mm,
that relationship, and pornography played a part, and substance addiction played a part. And I went through this, we walked each other through, right? He was my companion through a real growing experience where, for these 7 years, I watched myself lose really core pieces of my essence and become more and more fractured over time. So before that relationship, we could say I had kind of gotten over my young insecurities and things like that, and I was pretty whole. And I was in my sexuality and in my being in a natural way. I felt the best that I had ever felt. During that relationship, I watched all of that um, unravel. And it happened simultaneously with raising the goddess temple, right? Like
Mhm.
my whole life was full and was shining, and this place where intimacy was meeting me was unraveling and gradually wearing away um, my actual sense of myself. So I wrote the book. I went through a long process of actually having to reclaim, like go deep into what was going on. Why was it that I was so agonized? Why was I making so many decisions that were actually incoherent, inconsistent with my deeper values? And it was having a huge cost, right?
Yeah, big
So
time.
the book came from that, and from what I experienced, which was that, there's a lot we can get from understanding things, talking about it, getting psychological and analytical insight into what we're up to and why we're making the choices we're making. But there's something that happens with sexuality that is energetic, emotional, touches the soul. And for me, that wasn't getting addressed and wasn't getting healed and wasn't getting understood. So that there was a necessity. In other words, the book came out of desperate necessity and a lot of pain. And lo and behold, it's one that it's a kind of pain that's shared by a lot of women and a lot of people. And it's not meant to be that way, you know.
I love this, and I want to commend you for being daring in this world to write this book.
Mhm.
One of the favorite parts that I have about this book are the action steps,
Yeah.
and I get these beautiful truth chills as I touch the book, as I soak in. Like I just open it up, and this is a fun game I like to play with books that are so divinely guided, like this one. And I just opened it to action steps and then recovering energy lost from neglect. Wow. Those feelings, have you ever, oh, neglect. Okay. So this, to begin, you find a place where you can work without interruption, whether outside in nature or somewhere at home that comforts and inspires you. So your safe space. Yeah. And lie down and sit comfortably. There's no posture requirement as long as you're relaxed, undisturbed. Those are the key. The first step is to meet what has dimmed in you. This, I'm going to tell you guys the link to this. I'm not even going to share the rest with you. You have to go buy the book. It's in the description. This link to this book in the description. I wanted to share though because this is important. I love that not only are you're addressing a need and that we all have as women to look at um, relationships and real stuff in relationships,
Yeah.
but really in a deeper thing because you're about taking accountability, responsibility, and the growth and the empowerment that happens, not staying stuck in the story of the victim. Because the one thing that if anybody didn't catch it, I'm going to point it out. When I asked you why that you wrote this book, you didn't go into some long ass story about some horrible narcissistic asshole that
Mhm.
did all these terrible things. You mentioned abuse, sexual abuse or pornography addiction, those types of things. And I want to say I get that. But I want to commend you also for not going down the victim rabbit hole of labeling and doing all that. That tells me that you've done some insane work here.
Maybe I
She
have. Yeah. You know what I think, and this is why I value the book so much, and is that I think one of the things that we have maybe forgotten or that gets misunderstood or just not even seen is that we actually initiate ourselves through sexual intimacies. So I'll speak for women, but I think this applies to men as well. Um, when we have these, I'll speak for that relationship, for instance, I'm aware that I was initiating myself into a deeper stewardship of my own sexual current, a level of mastery and embodiment that I wouldn't have brought myself to had I not paid the cost, right? That I initiated
Mhm.
through hardship. And I think we
Mhm.
miss that, right? It's not that things that happen are fair. It's not that they're right. It's not that we don't need to go down that, but it's that we have the capacity, especially when there's sexual fire, especially when there's the power of sexuality informing and infusing a relationship. We are initiating. And once we complete the initiation, that's when we're done, right? That's when the relationship clears. And the initiation doesn't get complete by fixating on the other person. There's an important place there, right? You know, and that's in the book as well. It's like, okay, you got to name it. You have to understand what the dynamics were, right? Like
Mhm.
I understand the dynamics. I understand what wasn't fair, what didn't feel good, what wasn't right, right? That's important. But it's like one of my favorite phrases is get the message and hang up the phone. And it really deeply applies here because if you stay fixated on the other person and on what happened, then that's power. That's personal power going away from you. And the
Yep.
point is not to decide what, at the end of the day, our agency is here. And like I said, I think that it's part of what the book guides is what is the initiatory pathway of a past lovership? What is it? What is it to walk that fully? Because when we do that, then we actually release it. And that can only be walked inside of ourselves, you know, kind of duh, but it's also, but yeah, you can say that, but then how do you actually do it? How do we, you know, we're talking about the fabric of our beings. And I think with myself and a lot of women I talk to, it's like our experience of intimacies that fall apart or betrayals, or they're visceral. It's like we can feel it in the fabric of our being. It's agony, right? We're not talking about just like what we're thinking or,
Mhm.
you know, this is a full-bodied, very multidimensional experience that touches us in so many ways. And so the way to we can't bypass that. You know, it's like that thing where you think you're over it or you've thought yourself around it and you see the person and all of a sudden your guts twist and like you're, you know, there's still such a visceral response. When we're looking
Yeah.
towards liberation, it's really to actually be fully filled back in with ourselves, to have really not only cleared the residual impact of whatever it was, but also to have gathered power from the experience, right?
Yeah.
Like an
Yeah.
initiatory experience is one in which we initiate into more of what we really are. It's a gathering of power. And so a lot of us, I think, are somewhere along the journey, right, of that, but we
Yep.
haven't yet gotten to the point where
I,
we've completed the initiation. Yeah.
I completely get this. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
let me tell you guys something. Look,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I had an experience, and I'm going to share briefly, not all of it, but some of it. So I've had a couple of experiences in dating since my breakup of 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
Both times, one was sexual, one was not. Both because by the time the second one came around, I knew I wasn't going down the rabbit hole because I just knew it wasn't right. And this time I listened to myself. The first time I listened to myself too, though, I want to be very clear about this. I really listened to what I wanted, and I wasn't playing games. Like, I knew what I wanted, and that was the end of that. Now, I have no regret on this at all. But it was a huge growth experience because I had to get really honest with myself. Who said yes from the get?
Mm-hmm.
Who
Yeah.
said yes from the beginning? Yeah, it was me. So that ended very just as quickly as it began. No harm, no foul. Later on, this person shows back up in my life by, from through another party, and I laughed. I laughed. I laughed at spirit. I laughed at myself. I laughed at the whole situation, and I just laughed. And I said, "All right." And I thought to myself, okay, all right, so be it. And I have this thing I go by. And that is, if this is my last day on this earth, how am I going to treat somebody regardless of who they were in my past?
That's a good one. Ooh, that's good.
And that's like a rule, honey, because if I don't go with that, like,
Yeah.
that comes from losing people to death. That's the Wayne when Wayne passed away, this is what hit me. The father of my kids. We wound up being best buds, so that's cool. But anyway, when I was in the position to be running the production and watching this person and doing what I was doing, there was nothing that came up other than I was really grateful they were partaking in what we were doing, and it was an overall great experience. I thought, at least I had one, because actually, isn't that important? I had one. I don't know what everybody else's was, but mine was good.
Mhm.
But what but let's look at the scenarios. Let's break that apart. What if you were faced with having to have this person basically in the same room? Okay. You haven't talked to them in 2 years and they're going to show up and you had a thing for a second, but maybe there was still something there. What would you do with that person who came to you and said, Jumana, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. They're going to be like right here in my face.
Mhm. That's why there are practices in the book, right? Because I could give all the advice in the world, like, oh, whatever, but it's not. Yeah. What I would say is that I think in that case, what I would say is like, all right, understand that this is a path of mastery, right? That it's not, we don't need to act like these aren't important things, and that
Yeah.
this is not a path of spiritual power and mastery, right? If we're going to go ahead and say, yes, we'll be sexual creatures, we'll be sexual females on this planet, right? Well, then we've just
Yeah.
stepped into a path of mastery, and that's what it'll ask, straight up, and so I would say to that person, like, all right, well, here you go. How are
How
you going to hold yourself? How are you going to, are you going to drop in? Are you going to watch and observe your own movements and leave that situation and be willing to tend to whatever has happened and be willing to take the feedback in your own mastery, like, so that it doesn't matter. Well, how are you going to show up? You're going to show up in your best way. You're going to see what happens. And you don't know, like in your situation, for instance, you were surprised there wasn't a lot of feeling. There could have been a
yeah.
10. I
Yeah.
know women who is, and I've had it too. It's like there's a person in my life who I also said yes to, knowing that it wasn't quite the right thing for me, but I had my reasons.
Mhm.
There were good reasons for saying yes to that, and saying yes to that sexual connection, that intimacy.
Mhm.
However, there was a residual impact. So it's an interesting thing, right? I could say yes, I could know the thing. I was actually like fully present in it, but then because of the way it played out, there was a power loss there. And so it's not that there was anything wrong that happened, but now then I had to deal with the fact that there was residual impact. And it's years, and this is not a person, this is a friend. It's not a person who is really a part of my life, but when I see them, I will have like a surge of anxiety still. And that's okay, great. Jumana, come back. What's going on there? Right. And I think
Mhm.
that um there's so much room, for instance, in that experience, there's so much room that could be quite legitimate, blaming, right? Making it like, well,
Mhm.
why do I feel this way? Well, that would not bring me to a place of the kind of intact confidence and trust in myself that I need to have in life, period. Right? Which is that I got this. I've got myself. And I think a lot of these things, kind of point out to us where we are still a little vacant inside of our own beings.
Mhm.
Like there's a place where, like, why is that person getting in? Why, like, where are we still
Yeah.
too porous, or where are we still in our desperation? There's so much to be honest with, right? Even when there's a lot of like obvious kind of wrongdoing on the part of the other person, there's plenty to be honest with right here.
Right.
Like desperation, my hidden desperations have led me down so many really devastating paths. And I've been just kind of reckoning with them lately, like seeing them in a more sober place. And it's like, okay, that's true. Wow, that's true about me. That's what I have here now. And I think that there's a way for women, it's tricky, right? When you there's that balance thing of like not taking on too much responsibility, right? Over internalizing all the things that happened as if it was all your fault. And, there's that we
Hmm.
get into versus kind of, deflecting everything towards the other person. There's a middle ground there, which is basically saying like, okay, this is mine. Whatever this is mine. And I'm going to walk it. And I want all of me. I think that's a big part of what these relationships bring is we have to come to a place where we're like, no, I want all of me. I want all of it. I want my desperation. I want my passion. I want my insecurity. And I want it here with me. I want it. And I'm going to be the mother of this. And I am going to tend to it. Right. And
Hmm.
that's fullness. That's empowerment. That's the fullness of woman. It's not just this like perfect, sensual, radiant, confident thing. The fullness of ourselves is when we say, I want all of me. And it all comes home. Right.
I love that. I want all of me is feels so much better because I think that is what we all seek, men and women both. This
Mm.
is, that remembrance and journey back to self. Um,
Yeah.
I want to bring this up. Lloyd says that, hello, good morning, Lloyd.
Morning, Lloyd.
Confidence confidence is an expression of humility. It's born from knowing yourself through inquiry, reflection, discovery, surrender. Thank you. Thank you, Lloyd.
Yeah.
That's I have to agree with that. Um, wow, so many things. I'm One of the things that came up when as you were talking, and I love that you were exploring. Each one was just a different aspect of you that you needed to see. Like each relationship, there's this part of it, but that hidden desperation you see. Let's look at what that even is, because first off, let's recognize the vulnerability in your words. Because if you really sit back and you think about those words, hidden desperation, what does that mean to you? Do you run from it? Are you willing to explore it? Because when we hear the word desperation, that could be a trigger, right?
Well,
So
it is triggering and it's an
yeah.
intense state. I think that's part of what, well, I'll speak for myself. I had a relationship that actually the way that it played out finally really almost killed me. And I think that that's
Mm,
one of the like the way that the initiation was intense. And that's one of the things that I'll just mention. I think a lot of people when we're moving through like a breakup or the dissolution of an intimacy or a betrayal, we feel like we might die or we want to die. That's not an uncommon feeling to at least pass through at some point. And if you understand that initiations usually come with a touch of death, right? Like you have to kind of meet a certain death, then you can even more
yeah.
understand what's actually going on here. But yeah, I mean, and so in my, my reflections actually, even over the past like 4 months, and this is after the book, after the course, after all the things, I had to look and I was able to look for a minute really and see like, oh, Jumana, like, you know what? That relationship took you to such a hell. And why it did that was because you were really, there was a desperation running in you.
Mm,
It was a desperation that didn't allow me to end it when it was time, that didn't allow me to um, be honest with what was happening. It was such a desperation to be met, to be like there was something it was touching in me. But yeah, so I mean, I think part of why it's hard to look at these things is they are, if you think of your being as having this terrain, like you are this whole, earth inside of you, and there are terrains in there that are desolate. They are desiccated. They are like it's really hard to look and see and feel that. in the rawness of what it actually is. But turning toward it is the only way that it starts to be irrigated by our presence and irrigated by what we really need, right? So, I mean, I think when I say desperation, that's a really hard one, I think, for a lot of us to be honest with, partly because maybe there's a certain amount of humiliation about having it. You know, we think we should be at a different place by now. But you know what?
Right? Oh god, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it was a very sober. I've been very sobered the past few months on upon further reflection. But you know, also I think that, and the book speaks about this too. Desperation, it comes from sacred needs that aren't being met. So I think, you know, the way that we often like think of it is like, well, if I'm desperate, then there must be some deficit in me. I must not be, you know, whatever. There must be some real deficit in me if I'm feeling this desperate or this desolate or this
Right.
needy, right? But what there really is are all these sacred needs that are not getting met by
Yep.
life, by the way that we're holding our lives. And so there's nothing wrong there. There's nothing, it's just that there are sacred needs that aren't being tended to. And I think a lot of what intimacies bring us to is the kind of, the cost becomes so high that there is no choice but to start to tend to those things on our own. There's no other way out, right?
Hallelujah. Oh my god, yeah.
And yeah,
Yes.
there's no other way out.
There is no other way out.
Yeah,
I have a couple people I know who are within the first year of a breakup
yeah,
or even the first 2 years, and I'll tell them, keep your booty single for a bit." My mom
yeah.
used to tell me that all the time, Jumana, and I used to look at her like she was crazy. I lived until I was 48 years old. I'm 52, almost 53 now,
Mhm.
but I lived until I was I think it was 48, 47, 48. Never having been single since I left the house.
Yeah,
And even well, before then too. I mean, I was married at 19 and I just kept going, you know?
yeah,
Just
yeah.
kept going. What I can tell you is that through what you're talking about, getting in touch with your sacred needs and knowing that you're the only one that can do that is huge because you have to be that you're seeking before you can find what you're seeking. You have to be that in your life. And that's what I discovered and I'm still learning. Jumana, I don't think that stops. I
Mm.
think that it's just an unfolding. You probably be and you're going you had these things happen after the book so you could write part 2. Just saying.
I could write part two.
Just
Yeah, I
say
probably
it.
could.
You
Just
should write
saying.
part 2,
Yeah.
you know,
You know,
right?
and you know, yeah, and you know what comes up for me too when you say that, it's like there is a way that, like, okay, with these sacred needs, we learn how to like steward them. But I think that one of the ways that they get that they remain unmet is that there's something deeply relational about sacred needs. They're not met just by ourselves. Like we don't get to a place where like what are the sacred needs? To be met, to be seen, to be cherished, to be held, to be known, to be honored, right? These are sacred needs that they bring the soul to the surface, right? It's part of our relational it's reciprocity with life. But I think what we kind of have forgotten is that, like, our relationship with all of life, with creation, right, with every day, every moment. There's a way in which it's not some kind of sovereignty. It's not some kind of like excessively independent sovereignty that just holds itself. It's actually this understanding that we need these things. We need to be met. That means if the breeze is touching you, you need to feel it. You need to take it in and recognize what's actually happening there. It means when the sun is warm on your skin, that you're taking it in, that you're feeling met. You know, there's a sensitization that wants to happen through us, I think, that a lot of us go the opposite direction, right? So after a relationship or something bad, something hard happens, we harden up, right? We get very hyper vigilant about where we're going to open up again, or all these things, and we start to starve even more for our own, for that feeling of opening that we crave through intimacy, right? Because what are we craving with sexual intimacy? We're craving to be infused, open. We're craving that kind of that.
Yeah.
And so there's something, I think, about reclaiming that we are in a lovemaking with life all the time, and that we need to be. And that's where the desperation starts to get filled in, is not is through opening to life in a different way, if that makes sense. It's part of saying, like, all right, you can take sexual intimacy as a place where you're going to initiate, but understand something. The way you show up in sexuality reflects how you show up in your whole world. It's your relationship to life. It's just going to be amplified there. So we can talk about sexuality and all these things, but in reality, where that gets healed and where that gets recontextualized and re-understood is how we are actually relating to life. Like, you as a woman, you're a confluence of all these things. You're a confluence of so many things, so many powers, so many sensitivities. And in that, creation wants to know you. Creation wants to love and cherish you. And so this is about how we carry ourselves as women, as beings in life, if that makes sense. We relegate lovemaking, we relegate that part of our nature and that part of our expression unnecessarily to this one place, right? And then there can be a lot of desperation there,
I think that
right?
rocks. I love that. And I'm going to,
Yeah.
so, because what I'm hearing you say is that, we have to stop and slow down and take in what's happening now. That the sensuality, the passion, the love, the zest for life is within the sexuality, but it's all through everything. Like everything there's something. Think about it. There's every little thing there's a piece of sensuality and a piece of that creativity and passion that flows through it. I mean,
Yeah.
how can we not look at the ocean or look at life itself, this earth, look at Gaia and not be in awe over just the majesty that's there? And in that is that beauty that you're talking about. And that, so not to confine what we have been taught as sexual or sexuality, but yet to expand our horizons on what that could actually mean. When we embody that, I think is what you're saying, is that when we can really get to our core of who we are first and meet our needs, you know, and a lot of people, when it comes to sexuality, I know from my own experience that their blocks were the trauma-based blocks.
Yeah.
And with sexual trauma-based blocks, that change, it really, this is the hardest work for me. I'm not even going to be like, I won't even sugarcoat that. It is the hardest work for me, is to deal with all of this. So I find this to be fascinating, and I will continue to seek like that piece, those pieces actually, that we're simply just not there for me, Jumana, just because they were blocked. So I mean, I'm still uncovering a lot of that. And even needs, okay, are basic human needs, and this is for everyone. Even in needs, I didn't know what they were. It took studying Marshall Rosenberg's work, compassionate communication skills, and things like that, in order to really start getting what are needs. And in emotional intelligence, that's another form of understanding what needs are. But that right there is I think probably one of the biggest pinnacle keys to understanding ourselves, is really, at least for me, it's like, what is it that I actually need? Rather than trying to fill it with, if I go out and try to fill it with men, I'm just dead in the water, because that's just not going to happen. I did that. That didn't work. No.
Yeah,
No.
right. It's this interesting journey where we need to come from our fullness
Yeah.
to whatever it is. Otherwise, that's where a lot of the entanglement happens. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Mm-hmm.
that you mention, I mean, you know, I have one of the mentors from this school. In fact, you know, okay, the fact of the matter is when I sit in circles of women, usually, honestly, somewhere between 60 to 75% of them have had some form of sexual trauma. It's not like, you know, that is usually the percentage. And so I think that excuse me. I think that let's see if this helps. I've watched women come into incredible sexual potency and fullness and health from histories of long-term sexual abuse, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what I think is true about it is that it's possible, and but it requires devotion. You know, talk about an initiatory path. Talk about a reclamation of innocence, a reclamation of who you really are, right? So it's just, you know, I just have such, that's a whole other topic, right? But I
Right.
think that what I think is that it is a path that requires devotion, right?
Yes.
And like what I've seen in women who have really recovered, like really recovered, and it's not like they recover and it's done. You know,
No.
this is how trauma works. It will be, you will be companioning it for the rest of our lives. It's not that like we get shaped by these experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not, it's like, and yet that doesn't mean that we won't have our fullness, um, that we won't be able to touch these things. There's something that remains intact, but then all of a sudden, it's actually a devotional path. That thing that could have been innocent and intact from the beginning. And how beautiful would that have been? But that's often, for the most part, that is not the journey of sexuality for most women. The
That
journey
is
of
true.
sexuality is a journey of redemption. It's a journey of reclamation. It's not a journey of innocence and beauty and wholeness that's just been preserved from the beginning. Like,
Yeah, yeah, no. I think
it's
Cinderella
not,
didn't. I don't even know where that came from, actually. Somebody's great imagination, because that's
yeah.
not how it is. Even
It's not how
though,
it is. Yeah.
even though I think that we all desired that. So what I'm wondering though is that as we step into this wholeness and we understand now where the wholeness is, then is it possible to we reset ourselves and we go forward from that space that
Yeah.
we were meant to go from in the first place?
Yeah, but reclaimed, right? And there's something, I don't understand why it is this way. I don't really agree with it. You know, I
Right.
don't appreciate that so many of us initiate through hardship and brutality, and like I don't appreciate that. You know, but there it is. It's the truth. And the more that I work with women, the more that I see that it's what's true. It's how it's working right now. And yeah, and I've lost your question a little bit, but I think that when I say it becomes then a journey of redemption and reclamation, there is something, like I'll speak from my 7-year journey with pornography addiction and my partner. What I am on the other side of that, the
Mhm.
level of stewardship and the level of devotion and self-respect and self-advocacy around my own sexual current as a holy thing, it's somewhere that it could never have been if I didn't have to reclaim it like that. So I don't think that, you know, I don't like it that that's the way that it is, but I think that that's the trajectory. You know, I think that that's where we're headed. That's where we're kind of forced by this situation. There is no other way to come back into your wholeness in that place unless you come to full self-advocacy and reverence and stewardship of your own sexual current. And that is, you know, when I talk about sexual sovereignty, or working with Break the Grip of Past Lovers, there is there is a way of coming into understanding our own sexual current, our own sexual fire as our own, as a resource for ourselves. And part of what we're starting to unbind by doing that is that we can only touch it in the presence of another, right? I think one of the desperate places we need to touch our sexual current. It's our destinies in there. There is so much of our own unique signature, our passion and our soul there, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
but if we are all, for some reason, only touching that because we have heat and chemistry with somebody else, or they've been able to catalyze that, then we are dependent. And that is true. And there is, for me, that's one of the places that women have the most agency, is to actually cultivate their sexual current as their own, available to them as a resource all the time. So it's something that we can say like, okay, well, I'll share this with you, but not something like, oh my God, I just met this person and I'm feeling all this and I haven't felt it in so long. And then of course, now you're just going to be like, it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
ravenous because it's a need, right?
It is, and I'm gonna tell you though. Here's this last. Okay, so the last time I went on a date, and it's been well, it's that was a year ago. I was doing that.
Mhm.
Uh, that did come up, and I started thinking for about a split second, and then I went, "Oh yeah, no, oh no,
Mhm.
no, 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 we're not doing that. You see, we're not gonna." And the reason I told the whole humanness part of me no was I said, "I'm gonna do this differently. I am not going to step into this, um, like I've done in the past. I'm gonna do it differently and hang tight and see how things flow." And even though he is a great person, it wasn't an alignment. So,
Mhm.
but had I went down a different path, it would not have been good. Even
No.
I even recall going out. We stopped to eat somewhere, and I had, like, some reaction from whatever it was we had, and I remember getting back to his place, and I'm literally just broken out in sweats going, "Oh my god." I mean, I don't even know what happened. Like, there was just this, and after that, I went, "Yeah, there's something not right here." My whole body was just like,
Yeah.
get out, stop." And but knowing how to listen to that didn't come because it didn't come overnight. I had to really go through this. So I have to also say that one of the things that helped me in my healing was learning to appreciate the trauma, was learning to appreciate and be really grateful for having this experience, because now I can show up for other people and say, it's going to be okay. And here's why, because you can look at me and I'm telling you, you're going to be okay. And how that you're going to be okay, it's going to take some work, but you can do this. One of the things I love about this book here is that this is actually a guide to break patterns, and to this is what this is really about, is breaking the patterns that aren't serving you anymore and initiating patterns that are going to serve you.
Yeah.
That's what I dig about it, because that's what it brings. And sometimes we all just need to be able to have a guide. So when you get to a situation and women have decided, do you suggest they take a break sometimes, just for a minute?
From being in sexual relationship? Yeah.
Hmm.
I think it's great, um I do. I mean, what I mostly suggest is that they do what it takes to be able to hear themselves, because we don't know, right? We don't know quite. So, I mean, I'm hesitant to say I suggest this or that, because I think that there's a very where the real salvation is for us is in that deep listening, right? It's
Hmm.
in being able to hear in the moment what is right, what's right, this now, not this, not now, that thing. I do think that it often requires like just feeling yourself for a while. We are responsive, especially if we're in intimacy, we're in a unified field with somebody else. And if you've done, which I've also done, which has been in relationship since the teenage years, it's like when did we ever actually feel what it means to be just one unto ourselves,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So, but I love that you bring up the listening, and that's a triumph what you're describing. And what I think is that oftentimes we don't realize the extent of the triumph, like because it happens really kind of easily, right? In that moment, you were like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that, and it happened, but it is actually the accumulation of so much, right? And you know
Yeah,
that's in the book, and it's also what I talk to women about a lot. It's like there's this, how else do we learn other than walking it? Like, there are always the voices inside of us that knew better, right? Like I can look back at my relationships, and especially the ones that led me to hard places, and I'm very aware now of like,
right.
oh yeah, oh that voice, oh that red flag, oh that. But if I hadn't walked the terrain, how would I have, like, we don't get there by just like knowing it. There's a way that we're on a long walk, right? And I think that there's something, and part of what I gathered in the book also is like, all right, look, that's the truth. We're on a long walk. Like, look, I wrote the course, I wrote the book, and then I got into a relationship that ultimately left me in a worse place than I've ever been in my life, right? So, okay, so let's just take that for a minute. But why was it okay in a way? Is that's because there were things I couldn't see. There are things that we can't see yet. And if we could just hide, we could close ourselves off from relationship, or we could gather what we need in order to know that no matter what happens, we're going to be able to recover. Like some of the practices in the book, the restoration of virginity, recovering power loss, you know, reinstating your actual intact being, filling, all these things, like these are part, for me, they're part of a very ancient, you know, gathering, a very ancient knowledge base that we need in order to know that we can go ahead and do this thing called sexual intimacy. And if we end up somewhere we didn't mean to be, or if all of a sudden there's a big reveal and this person is not who we really thought they were, that we can recover. Right? I feel like a lot of
Yeah,
what happens for so many of us is we launch into sexuality, and there's an inevitable unknown to it, right?
yeah.
To
Mhm,
int
mhm.
But we are given nothing. We don't have anything. We don't have that, um, deep knowing. We do not know how to restore ourselves, and therefore, we start to become more and more afraid of intimacy the more we go. We accumulate all these things, these betrayals, the times we thought we knew but we totally didn't, the times that we betrayed ourselves, like all the things, we
Mhm.
accumulate that, and then at a certain point we become rigid, we become hyper vigilant, we become no longer able to really open to intimacy. And the answer is not going to come but from becoming more hyper vigilant and so super smart and discerning and psychic that you know what's going to happen. We never get there. There's always going to be an unknown. And so it comes from, I think, the dual movement of like, yes, getting more and more discerning, understanding like, okay, if I go down that road, I'm going to bond, this, that, and the other thing is going to happen. I'm not going to do that for myself, you know, and
Yeah,
understanding of the power of sexuality, but also that like, hey, you're made for this, and that's part of what's in the book too. Is like, hey, we were actually made for this. We're made for it. We are actually made to recover from these things. Sexual trauma. We are made to recover from intimacy traumas and relationship. It's in some ways it feels like with many things that reside in the deep feminine, it's an unknown, it's a somewhat interrupted lost wisdom stream, right? How does a woman restore virginity? Right? Did anybody
mm,
teach you that? How do we actually, like, I can clear a past lover now swiftly. And it's like, and because I've practiced it and because I go into practice when it's time and I know what to do, right? So there's a way in which I have myself, and it's not because I can make sure everything's perfect all the time,
yeah.
you know?
Wow.
So
Okay, so I mean, this is one of this is why that you have her mystery school though. Okay,
Yeah.
this is why, because this is where you really, the book takes you on this path and starts you there, and it's really it's a great resource. But her mystery school is where that you go deeper. You don't have any openings until September, but
Yeah.
isn't that really the place for people to go into a deeper dive?
Yeah, her mystery school is 9 months long, and there we're looking at the entirety of the deep feminine spectrum. Sexuality in the school we have 1 month devoted to paradise, which is you know real embodiment of sexuality. But it's like what I said. It's like that when we come to sexuality, we are trained and we're enculturated to compartmentalize it as if
Mhm.
there's
Mhm.
sexuality and here's the rest of us, and it is nothing like that, actually. And so there's a whole approach to life and to ourselves as women that is full spectrum, right? And
Mhm.
that therefore then changes how we show up in sexuality. You know, the way that we cultivate our personal power and steward that. The way that we remain in a relational, like a real, like able to be penetrated by life, able to be really moved by life.
Mhm.
And the way that we navigate the annihilations of it, all these things, right, that are in her mystery school. But um, yeah, the book. And then we have the sovereign sexual, there's a membership, the sovereign sexuality membership that I've been running that's very specific to sovereign sexuality, right? But
Mhm.
the school is a much broader holding. Hmm.
And I think that that's really important for there to be a safe space for
Yeah,
people to go and really discover, uncover, and learn more about what makes you who you are and how to tap in to be the best version of you can be. And that's really what all this is about, you
yeah,
know. And what I love, if you look on this book, I mean, it says clear, transform, reclaim.
yeah.
Okay. And by the way, it's available at Barnes and Noble and it's also available on Amazon. You can go right up into the description of this particular live feed and get the link. And in fact, I think I might have the link right here. Well, I
Yeah.
have Jumana Sophia right here. So there's her website. Okay. So you guys have that. But I'm I'm always so when I'm sitting here and I'm interviewing, I always have my cards just because I do. And sometimes I bring them forward, but sometimes I don't. Today I have to because you can't make this up. So wh- what I'm getting for you is relationships, of
Yeah.
course, right?
Okay. Oh.
And the next one is rebirth.
Hmm.
Uh-huh, look at that beautiful butterfly, and
Yeah.
so you're going through that birthing, like you've been in a cocoon a little bit there,
Yeah.
after everything that you've been through, which we talked about it. I mean, but I'm just this is a confirmation. I'm not telling her something she doesn't know.
Yeah.
Here's the key, is the abundance.
Ah, yeah, right. The fullness, the fertility, the innate state of
Mhm.
fertility and abundance that is the Garden of Woman. You're making me want to just like note for everyone that after that extremely devastating, like kind of final initiation, I've only had honoring, beautiful relationships only. And the most, yeah. So just in terms of a message of hope,
Yeah.
we burn it out, and we burn it out for a reason. We burn in these things until the burn is done, right? And that is how transformation happens. And it does lead somewhere, you know. There is a deeper intelligence to it, right? Rebirth. And
Rebirth, absolutely. I'm
yeah,
typing I'm putting it in the chat for everybody right now. It is a rebirth, and I'm just laughing because it's like you can't make that up, and the confirmation is this.
yeah,
Whatever was said today were words probably that you needed to hear. Sometimes some of the things we hear sound a little bit harsh, and if your first reaction was, "I'm that's now," and you were like resisting it, most likely it's something you probably needed to hear. So if your cages got rattled with a couple of the words that were used, good, because it's time. It's time to shake off that's not serving you anymore and step into your divine power of who you are. Um, JumanaSophia.com is right here. It's floating below. And Jumana, I want to know. So, do you have any workshops coming up on this one?
We're gonna do one actually. We've just been thinking about it. There's a Dionysia LaFay is the sexuality and intimacy mentor with
She is
Miss
something
Sisters.
else. Oh my
She's
God.
something.
Oh
Yeah,
Lord,
and
I really dig her.
yeah, she's awesome. So she's actually gonna hold something sometime in the future. Right now, what really the sovereign sexuality membership is what I created for that, because it's a topic every 2 weeks. There are practices, that's kind of going deeper into the book,
Okay.
where we actually, we break apart different trauma bonding, claiming all the things. It's been a huge breadth of topics. That's really where we're kind of continuing to hold that
Okay.
exploration. That's
Where
on the
can
site.
is
That's
that
on
just
Jumana Sophia.
okay, great. So
Yeah.
you can sign up for it right here. Okay?
Yeah.
And I mean, come on. This is why the right now, let's face it, Jumana, we have a show called Women Rising on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m.
hmm
Now, I didn't seek to do a show called Women Rising. It happened. But
hmm
it happened because this is the time that we're in, everybody. It's what we're here to do. It is time that we as women start understanding our sovereign sexuality as well as um our beautiful initiation into this world. I love what you said. When you come in as a female, you step into a path of mastery. And not that men aren't, but I just get that. We can make babies. That's just as simple as that. I don't know what else to tell anybody. They say, "Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we make babies." So, because we can make babies, there you go. That's it. I mean, and I don't think there's anything else left. Seriously, women and motherhood and all of this are part of that juiciness
Yeah.
that comes with being female in this world. So,
Well, and when we say that, being a woman is a path of mastery, that is saying that being a sexual creature, how do we create babies, right? It's just that it's so much more than what we've been told. But,
yeah,
and for me, that's, yeah, our intimacies, what we go through as lovers, in sexual intimacies, this is part of our lineage.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
just, it really, for me, it's about, let's uphold this for what it really is, which is like, it's not just something to like have tea and talk over. It's not just something to like, get sassy about, or get political about, or anything. This is an initiation into soul, period.
yeah,
What we're made to be. And there's a recovery of truth that wants to happen through our walk with sexuality. I don't see a whole lot of that being held. It's still, the very discerning, very delicate walk that we're being asked to make, to actually reclaim ourselves away from all portraiture, away from all the things that anybody is telling us it should be or it is, to really, like, for me, it's about, look, if you are going to open to someone sexually, understand that it's quite possible that they're going to touch your soul, that your soul is going to want to come to the surface. And what may happen there is more powerful and more vulnerable than we can possibly understand, unless we turn toward it in that way. And, people wonder why there's so much entanglement, why all of this. It's because this is potent. It's the most potent force on the planet,
yeah.
sexuality. And yeah.
It
So,
really, that is such a beautiful place for us to start coming to a close
yeah.
because I mean, I think that we could just sit and talk with you forever. We're going to be having you on Women Rising on Unify,
Yay.
and then in the coming weeks, and we're going to dive deep. And I know there's a couple ladies on our panel that are going to go nuts just over the topic of break the grip of past lovers. You guys, you have to go get this. It's right on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble, or you can go ahead at the link in the description and order the book now so you can get that and start on your journey to discovering who you are. And if you missed any part of this, go back, watch the replay, because that's what most of you do anyway. And that's what I do even. And yeah. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to say bye-bye and I'm going to show just a split minute of spiritualitygonewild.com, our Untamed Club. You can come and have fun with us, and there's all kinds of goodies behind the scenes. So that's all I got to say. And it's a super whole lot of fun. Super whole lot of fun. Jumana. Oh, Lord. Mandy says, "Hey, Mandy. Hi. It is an awesome book, Mandy. You've got to get it. I'm telling you right now. Seriously." So, and Lloyd, before we go, I was going to say goodbye, but right here with you in this truth and beauty, you so simply and eloquently bring all applies to awakening the embodied man as well. Beyond ginger rolls is where this beautiful spring pours forth. Ah, men, ah, women. Deep bow to this surrounding mutuality.
Thanks, Lloyd. I love that you're in there speaking on behalf of men. You know, I'm very careful to speak from what my experience is rather than to which, you know, my experience has been very much incarnate and female. But my conviction is that yes, this is human, right? These are human.
It's all human.
Truths. Yeah.
We human, and Lloyd, you great human. We love you.
Lloyd, we love you. You're a great human.
You're a great human.
You're a great
And
paladin.
right? All right, guys. So I'm just going to show you a quick blurb, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Make sure that you watch David Strickle later on today, channeling the stream of David, and go back and watch Steve Weber's American Gumption from this morning, and join our Untamed Club because it's just because we're the cool club. That's why.